Teresa, we didn't hear from Ben, right? Teresa? We didn't hear from Ben? Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Monday, December 19th. This is the Stratford Public Schools Board of Education Finance Committee meeting. My name is Amy Wiltsey, and I'm the chairman. I will call the meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Thank you for everyone for being here. And for the record, Mrs. Bedell is virtual, joining us here tonight on the computer. Our first action item is action item B, acceptance of minutes for our November 28th, 2022 meeting. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Carol Fabian, second by Ms. Cupie. Thank you very much. We'll take an all in favor.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you very much. Our next item is item C, budget transfers. This month there are no budget transfers, so we will move to item B, financial reports. And we will start with Mrs. Mangini on our expenditures and encumbrances, please.
Good evening, everyone. I know you did receive the financial status report, and it's through November 30th of 2022. And we are still taking a very conservative approach. As I noted with regard to salaries, we have had a significant number of personnel changes. So we are trying to analyze all of those, make the necessary adjustments, and we should have a better idea of what our potential year-end balance in those accounts may be. Obviously, if there's positions vacant and we don't fill them until October or November, there's some savings there. So that's what we're trying to capture to report to you. And everywhere else, for the most part, we're trending right now as we projected, except for professional services and its clinical costs. I know that Ms. Borges had explained to you at the previous meeting that we have had a number of students that were outplacements that have returned to in-district, but they did require some additional services, so that's part of the reason for that deficit. And she will be bringing a transfer request to you at the next meeting because there were some additional costs, so we thought we'd capture them all and hopefully just bring it to you in one transfer. And then, of course, in the 600 account, that reflects the gasoline cost for our school buses and our Board of Ed vehicles that I've talked about the last couple of months. And I did reach out to the town. Hopefully we'll be going out to bid again because we're only locked in until next November. And that kind of makes it challenging for our fiscal year 24 budget. So we're hoping to go out to bid so that we won't end up in this predicament next year. And that's basically my report. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I'd like to open up to questions. Mr. Henrik?
Yeah, so last month there was a lot of confusion around the transfer. I know you'd send out a report. There was, talking with some of the people of the town too, was just trying to get an understanding of, we were told there was a written request by the town and we would see it, but we hadn't seen it yet. And I didn't see anywhere in the financial report anything for fire insurance. I don't know where that falls typically.
You wouldn't see it in the report because right now the adjustment was to the previous fiscal year, and there's been a request made by the town finance director for us to adjust our current operating budget, but Dr. Sunday had responded to that request that would be extremely difficult for us to do this year, and we're unable to do that at this time. So you will not see any adjustment to our current operating budget.
So but we were told that the transfer was for the previous year, and we were using the previous year's surplus And is that the case?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
And so the town requested us to use that surplus?
Yes.
Okay, and so they we had asked, and we're told there was a written request. Is there a written request that came to them? Can we see a
No,
copy?
there was an email that told us, it actually went to Susan Nicholson, our finance director. She was told that they would be expensing to our fiscal year 22 operating budget an additional $202,654 for insurance. And that was, we received that notification like October 27th.
Okay. Can you forward us that email too? We
Sure.
had talked about that last month.
Absolutely.
It was just a very confusing process. I know you weren't here, and Dr. Sunday, I think, did the best he could and probably explained it just as well, but it was just, we had a bunch of questions,
Sure.
and it just seemed like so just trying to get some clarification and to make sure that, and where does the fire insurance fall? And one of the questions was, and my assumption is, that the fire insurance is to insure the interior of the building, and the town carries a policy for the exterior?
What I realized is that our account says fire insurance. It's a long-standing account code, but it's actually property and some liability insurance within that. And what I had provided to the board with that memo of explanation was the insurance renewal marketing summary. And you'll see on there that the property and liability is coverage shared with the town. So that's the portion that they're expensing to us, which includes fire insurance.
And that would be, well, it was called fire insurance in
The
a
line item.
line item transfer, so that's where that would be found?
Correct,
Okay,
correct.
all right, okay. Well, hopefully we can, get some, and was it, it's a large number. Did they, I mean, typically we get a policy in the beginning of the year, I would assume. Was there that big of a mistake made? Why is there such a large number and a large discrepancy in a policy that should be just a standard cost?
Well, as my memo pointed out, there was no error on the part of the Board of Education. We budgeted appropriately in accordance with our guidance from the town on that line item. It was in October, 4 months after the end of the fiscal year, that we were advised by the town that they were going to expense back an insurance cost, because what they did was take the total of that insurance and did allocations. And they felt that our allocation should be higher by $202,000.
Okay, so that was an error by the town then?
It would appear so.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mrs. Lance?
I'm not being rude, but where do I think we're gonna get that money from?
In this fiscal year, it is definitely a challenge, particularly this early in the fiscal year. In one sense, it's late in the fiscal year because we certainly can't make any significant adjustments. As you well know, most of our budget is staffing.
Right.
And, I think Dr. Sunday did a very good job in explaining our concerns to the town when he responded.
Now, have they given us an amount for the budget you're working on right now?
They have, and it will increase our budget by about $225,000, which is a considerable amount of money.
Pam, if I may, has the allocation percentage changed on behalf of the town, or has their request dollar amount changed? I know that it's probably the same question, but were we once charged 40% and now we're being charged 60% of the
I
policy?
believe in my short time here, and in speaking with Chris Kamiak was my main person to talk to initially, and my understanding and what he explained is we would get a dollar amount to put into our budget, and any additional allocation or portion of that expense would be considered an in-kind to the board. And I'm not sure how that transpired, but that was my understanding. I believe that, I really don't know how they do the allocations. I haven't really I just looked at what I was provided, but I haven't seen the policy. I don't know how many buildings are covered. And I mean, I'm not disputing that, you know, our town finance director can do the math appropriately, but I haven't seen anything to back it up yet.
And we did make some requests
I was just gonna.
for some of those items. You haven't received that yet, correct?
That is correct. We made the request, but we haven't received anything yet.
And that request was made before our November meeting, correct?
It was
Second week of November?
November 21st or 22nd.
Thank you. Ms. Carol Fabian, you had a question?
I actually have several questions, comments, kind of concerns. So first and foremost, thank you, Pam, for providing everything that you provide us and the explanations you give us in here and before here when we, berate you with our emails of, I don't understand, right? One thing is, right, I guess you kind of answered that a little bit, right? I was going to ask where we stand with regards to the breakdown of the insurance costs from the town. Because I know at the last meeting I had asked if we could get a breakdown of how it applies to each building or how it's allocated or factored, how much the Board of Ed pays towards that, and we still have not.
Correct. Very reasonable request. We just have not yet received it.
Okay. I guess my other question I was wondering also was, when you speak about how we've already been asked regarding additional money from this fiscal year, do we know why at this point was a larger portion expended to the Board of Ed? Like, do we know, like, were all other departments in town notified of an increase, or?
I would imagine that the other town departments probably don't have a line item in their budget for insurance. I mean, I don't know that for a fact. I just know as a former town finance director, we normally would just have a line item under administration that would cover that.
Okay.
So I'm really making a gross assumption that it's done the same way. It may not be. But I really don't have any information on the reason for the increase, other than, it could very well be that when they looked at their policy, they realized that they weren't expensing the proper percentage based on buildings to the Board of Ed. I simply don't know because we just don't have the information yet to back it up.
Okay. And then this summary you provided us, this is in comparison of this year to next year.
Yeah, just so you understand the process, because I did watch the Finance Committee meeting last month, and it just seemed like there was a little bit of confusion. Right now, we have reached out to our insurance brokers through Gallagher, and they give us what they feel the industry trend percentage is and what we should put into our budget. And they've really been wonderful about going out and really getting some competitive bidding for us, particularly with cyber insurance, which has gotten so expensive. So we evaluate each area, and what I provided you with is exactly what our final costs were, and that's usually sometimes it does come a little bit later, so maybe we'll have some savings, but we do go by their guidance in what to put into the budget, because oftentimes we don't get this until later in January or February. And I've had years in other districts where I honestly haven't gotten really final costs until maybe May or June, but that was to our advantage because we kept negotiating, and they're very good. I've worked with this company before, and they will be aggressive in getting us the best pricing.
Right, so I guess my only thought and my question, I guess, too, is in looking at this summary, right, I assumed, and I could be wrong, that the Gallagher also insures the town, correct?
Correct.
So if the Gallagher's providing this to us, I'm assuming the town also has requested and gotten something similar to this for their insurance.
Yes, I think so.
And I get like it's just an estimate and things change, renewal dates and things can, I just don't understand. I just can't get over the increase of 200. That's like saying like the policy, right? Like we're seeing like ours went up like about what, 1%? But asking us for an additional 200 something thousand, that's like a 94% increase. Math's not mine, but 94%.
It's significant, and it was.
Like, how is that, I'm certain, based on like seeing something like this given to you, that something like this was given to the town, and it did not jump 94%. So why is our number jumping 94%?
I wish I had an answer, but until we get some backup information, I simply don't know what transpired on the town side for them to ask us for more.
Yeah, and I would echo that. I think there's a lot of unknowns that we're reaching out and we're trying to get responses to so we can make informed decisions. Retroactively looking at fiscal year 22, we were fortunately in a position to be able to support that request. This year we're not in a position, but as we continue to construct a budget for future years under this design, it eats into any ask that we have, that we're positioned to ask as a board. So we do need answers. We need a little bit more detailed information so the board can make informed decisions, specifically around the budget.
Okay, Mrs. Bedell had a question, and then we'll go to Mrs. Lance.
Just a quick question. I apologize because I can only hear some of what Ms. Mangini is saying, but the blue and yellow outline from Gallagher that we have in front of us, that is last year, 21-22, ending 22, and then this current year that we're in, correct?
No, actually, yes, the current year, you're correct. It's showing the expiring, and then it was showing the new premiums based on the bidding that we did for our budget the budget that we're in, you're correct.
And the additional $202,000 that they're looking for last year, and then the additional amount that they're looking for this year are added to that total program cost line, correct?
Yes,
So it's in addition to that total program cost line?
that's correct. And the program cost only reflects the insurance that the Board of Education carries itself and puts directly into its budget. The 202 that you see or the 220,000 that you saw in your budget for the fire insurance is the amount the town tells us to budget. And that's the number that's increasing.
Are you all set, Mrs. Bedell?
I think so, yeah.
Okay,
Thank
Mrs.
you.
Lance?
I know that the town has their own insurance for health insurance, and the board has their own policy for health insurance.
Is your mic?
I'll talk louder. So anyway, what I said was that the town has their own insurance, medical insurance policy, and we have our own medical insurance policy. Why can't we have our own insurance policy for this plan instead of having to be part of the town? Because if they're giving us a quote of what they gave us, it's ridiculous that we have to come up with the $220,000.
Well, you just have to bear in mind that as a town, they do own and manage school buildings. And, when you're a regional school district, where I've been in the past, we owned our own buildings as a school district. Here, we do not. They're town-owned, so it isn't unreasonable for them to have one policy that covers the entire town. Oftentimes, the towns don't even bother allocating any percentage of that to the Board of Ed, and they do it purely as an in-kind. When we get all that information for our annual state report, that is a common dollar amount that we receive. And each town does it differently. I'm not saying that our town does it in an incorrect way, it's just a little bit different. So it isn't uncommon for it to be separate. And the health insurance, don't forget, they are self-insured, so they have a whole different set of rules.
Right.
So we are fully insured, and that wouldn't work anyway. I think if we went self-insured, then we probably would have one big umbrella as well.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead, Denise.
And it's more, I think, clarification, because at the last meeting I did ask to include a question to whoever was sending them to Pam for the town, and it was sort of getting a breakdown, of the policy by building types, right? So are the school buildings, carrying a higher premium versus other town buildings? Like, I would like to understand that, because if we are truly utilizing most of the cost. I would want us to know that, right? If the town is accommodating us there, maybe that is not the case, but being able to see that, I think, would be helpful for us when we're planning in the future. So I just want to make sure that was included in the request that was sent to you. Okay, great.
We
Thank
asked
you.
for a complete breakdown, so yes, hopefully we'll get all of that.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Amy.
Sure. Pam, one last thing on this. As we had questions and answers in my mind, I'm thinking of the conversation you brought up with Chris Timniak when you first came on, and anything over what they asked us to budget for was considered in kind. With only a 1% trend, right, of an increase, is it fair to say that that former practice of any in kind being managed by the town no longer being a practice of in kind to the Board of Education? I know that's tricky, and I'm sorry to.
Yeah,
it could
no,
be an
I'm
assumption,
not
but-
really sure. I think, we have to accept what the town gives us as in-kind when we submit to the state, because we don't have backup for that.
Right.
We take a look to see if it's reasonable. I've questioned a couple of things, but, that's really under the town's purview, and I have to trust that they're doing their due diligence, and I'm sure they are, but I don't really know how this has played out. I don't know what has happened in the past and why it's changed all of a sudden.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions on this, Mr. Henry?
Yeah, just so I understand, the line item in your breakdown that the town is requesting the increase through is the active assailant property and liability?
Correct.
line item?
We don't get a dollar amount there as a premium, you'll note that, and that is the dollar amount that they provide through the town.
Okay, and that would incorporate the fire?
Correct.
Okay. And I don't, maybe answer that, maybe, but the fire includes for us just what's in the building?
I honestly don't know. I think that is just a very old title to that line, and I think it's much more. It's property liability. So that's why we're waiting to see what information we receive, other than, for example, I've been told it's master property, master flood insurance.
Okay. Yeah, just so maybe just along the way, which I'm sure you're asking for a clearer breakdown.
Yeah, exactly.
As to what it covers.
I agree. We'd
Yeah.
like to see that as well.
Thank you.
You have another question, Mrs. Carroll, maybe?
Is it possible, to get a copy of that policy? Was that part of the request? Just to see?
Yes, it was
Okay.
part of the request. We should be able to get that. I'm sure they're putting it together for us. We'll reach out again.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for Mrs. Mangini? Okay, we will move on to item number 2, grants update with Dr. Clemmie.
Good evening and happy holidays. As you'll see there on the grant report that should have been in your packet, we have just almost $24 million in grants at the end of November 2022. 3 new grants in the report that came through in November. There were the 3 of the big title grants, Title I, Title II, and Title III. So those are all in-house now. The only one we're waiting to hear from the state on is Title IV. And they've had that for a while, but just haven't got back to us yet on approving that. We submitted 2 grants in November and early December. We submitted a state mental health workers grant for $120,000 to support having more staff to treat students with mental health issues. And we submitted an HVAC grant for 2 replacement chillers at Flood Middle School. And other than that, really, we're just kind of rolling towards the end of the year here, cleaning things up and revising budgets as needed and things like that. It's the quiet time of year, and probably mid-January, early February, it'll pick up again. But even the state gives up for the holidays. So, any questions?
Mr. Henry?
So with the HVAC grant, I think I heard on the radio, there's a significant number of applicants for that. Is that the grant that they were talking about on the radio?
I would assume it's the same one. It's not necessarily, but the big state HVAC grant that was due in early December, they said they expected to have far more applicants than they could fund.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions for Dr. Clemmie?
Just
Yeah,
comment.
Mrs. Carroll Fabian?
I just wanted to thank you because I know we were under a really big time crunch deadline to get that HVAC grant in, because I know it was like December 1?
December 5th, yeah.
Yeah, so it was really thinking, I know you pulled it all together to get it through to us, to get it through to the town, and flood was the easy one, right? Because it was, one, it's needed, but two, it was already worked up, right?
It was
Ready to
already
go.
worked up, which made it the only one that qualified under the criteria the state issued for this
Okay.
grant. You had to be so far along in the project before they would consider it. And thank you for the acknowledgement, but it was a real team effort. We had people from the town, we had people from the district, we had the architects involved. There were a lot of people putting things together.
No, I know, and I just appreciate, you're the one here, so thank you for being part of that team to make that happen and get that moving.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Covey. Next, we have Ms. Borges with special education and PPS report.
Good evening, everyone. First, I'm going to say if you have a pen with you, when you go down to the first little box, we actually are up 12 more students with exceptionalities, so we are at 1,234. So we're up 12 since the last time we met, which was only 3 weeks ago. I don't know if you guys recall, but every year I talk to you about that move-ins increase from December through January. And the trend is continuing to happen now. So just to make you aware, a lot of that increase is from there. Okay? You guys will see that I'm running in a deficit for 300s. There's a couple reasons for that. Ms. Mangini touched on one of the reasons, which is we are still at 90 students for the out-of-district placements, and returning students, they need services. Some of them need nursing services, some need one-to-one CIAs, some need curricular boosts, or just different parts to make sure we can meet their needs while they're in district. The second piece of the deficit in there is going to be because we're going to owe some students some compensatory education. Okay, we have been struggling to fill 2 speech and language pathologist positions and 1 special education teacher position. At the respective schools that those positions are in, those students have hours that we are legally obligated to do and the students need. So as we are contracting services to give those students the needed hours, you're going to see that deficit go down, which is why next meeting, I'll bring a budget transfer forward from the out-of-district placements to cover some of those costs to support the students. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah? Okay. Everything else is trending as it should be. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Other questions for Ms. Borges? Ms. Carol Fabian?
Ms. Borges, just one quick question. I know it's not more of the numbers here. Have we currently begun to provide these compensatory services?
Yes. We're providing them in a couple different ways. So we are reaching out to...
That was my next question.
Yeah. So we're reaching out to staff members to see if we have staff members who are willing to tutor before and after school to cover some of those hours. We are reaching out to staff members and carefully looking at their schedule to see if some of our self-contained teachers are willing to give up their prep or work during that time to provide the services that we need. And we are reaching out to agencies to pull people in. We just secured an SLP from an outside agency to push in 3 days a week to start compensatory hours. So that's what we're doing. We're using our staff, we're reaching out to agency staff, and we're also working with our RESC. So our RESC has come in and offered to do 11 different evaluations for us, including speech and language evaluations, similar to what they did last year, to help us cover some of the ones we're unable to cover.
So everything's being brought into the kids, like parents aren't having to figure out or go outside for services?
Bring everything in.
Okay.
And again, we're going to owe some time in the summer. We're going to do everything we can, but there could be some hours we don't make up, and we need to make those up over the summer.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Borges? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Food services report, Mrs. Mangini?
Yes, once again, we're in a very good place with our food service program. We will be monitoring this very closely over the next few months. As you know, we will be returning to paid meals on January 3rd, and there very well could be a decrease in participation at that point, as well as just not getting the amount of reimbursement that we've gotten under all these various programs the last 2 years. I think we've actually operated under 3 different ones. And as the SMART funds expire now, we will be, again, back to something that resembles the normal process that we've had in the past. So we will be checking the reports very carefully as far as our monthly reports that we get from Sodexo with all the expenses to make certain our labor costs are reasonable. And to Karen Rose's credit, she and I meet on a very regular basis, and she has tried really hard to minimize those staff hours wherever possible. So stay tuned, but we are in good shape now, and I think we need to just enjoy that and celebrate it for a while.
Thank you. Ms. Mangini, I did notice that the Connecticut Post and the Stratford Patch both shared articles about the Stratford school support coming to an end, and it did send parents to the online link for application. Have you seen an uptick in families applying for free or reduced lunch?
We have begun to, not as much as we had hoped so far, but we have seen some. We've processed a few, and some unfortunately haven't been eligible, but we still encourage families to try, because you just never know, and the income guidelines have changed, so they're a little bit more forgiving as well. So yes, we have had an increase, but not as much as we want to see.
Okay. Ms. Corcoran?
Do we know what the cost per lunch will be for those who are paying full price?
It will be the same as it was, and at the moment, my mind is just totally
No, I
blank.
don't remember, Pam. It's been so
Remember.
long. $3.45 for elementary? More?
I
No, I
should
think
know
it was
after
less.
the
I think it was like
RFP
$2.15.
process, but I will get back to
It
you
was
on that.
$3.25, right?
Pardon?
I thought it was $3.25.
I honestly can't.
But it's the same as it was.
Same as it was pre-COVID.
Way back when.
Yes,
Okay.
it's budget season, and there's just too many numbers in my head at the moment. I apologize.
Fair enough.
But it is on the
You're all set.
website.
Perfect. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Ms. Carol Fabian, did you have a question?
Just a question, for clarification for like anybody out there, parents or, with the application process, right? Some of our schools, the whole school will continue to get free lunch.
Correct.
Do those parents still have to apply so that we can prove that we have the need, or do they not have to apply because that school has already been deemed to receive free lunch?
They do not need to apply. Those schools.
It doesn't affect our
No,
status
it
to
really
keep that?
doesn't. They really don't have to, and it's those schools are actually determined based on what's called direct certification information that we receive from the state.
Thank you.
Thank you for stating the direct certification, because I know there's a lot of questions as to why this school and not the other, so thank you for clarifying that. Are there any other questions regarding food services from Mrs. Mangini? Mrs. Bedell, she's all set?
She's good.
Okay, thank you so very much. Mrs. Mangini, item C, please, enrollment registration update.
Certainly, you have enrollment reports as of December 1st, and we are still trending less than last year, but as I'm sure many of you probably noted, we do have some issues in our elementary with our class sizes. There are some schools that are close to the contractual limits, mostly sixth grade classes, but I will tell you we've been working very closely with those schools and those principals. We did add an additional third class to kindergarten at Chapel. And that's effective December 1st, so it isn't actually seen on your report this evening. And we are trying to provide support wherever it's needed. There has been an additional tutor through ESSER funds added to Nichols for grade 6. And again, this is my first district, quite frankly, where new registrations never end, and I often joke that there's a billboard out there somewhere for people to move to Stratford because it's just such a lovely town. And sometimes I want to spray paint it because we do have a lot of students and they're all wonderful, but we try first and foremost, honestly, to keep them in their neighborhood schools because that was the board's intent with the changes. And as we know, it has become problematic. So we do have some work ahead of us, but we are very careful with the new registrations not to put them in schools where those enrollments are really high. And then, of course, we have to struggle with if we are going to place them at a different elementary school, we have to make certain we can provide transportation. So it is a little bit of a juggle, but we are trying very hard to stay on top of it.
Thank you for that. Mrs. Cupie?
Sure, okay. Two things. I'm not sure if this information is available for us where we could see by school what the capacity is, because I know some of our buildings can only hold small class sizes, and I want to make sure when we're having these conversations, we are taking that into account. The other point I wanted to address is the racial balance of our schools, right? So we have a policy stating no grade should be less than 25% or more than 25% of the district's average. And I didn't whip out my calculator right now to do the math here, but I would love for us to take some time and just look at this by grade and see how that is in relation to our 72% total minority population, and kind of discuss how we're handling this.
You bring up some excellent points, all of which we are very much aware of.
Mm-hmm.
The building capacity, there are a couple of our schools where the classrooms are simply smaller than others, so we are trying to live within that when we make these decisions. I've learned a lot over the last 2 years about our district, but we are very, very careful with our student of color percentage, and it's not only through board policy, but it's also a state requirement, and we certainly want to make certain that we're in adherence to all of that as well. So we are constantly struggling with all of those variables when we make decisions to place students, but we do keep them all in mind as we make our decisions of which school, if we're not choosing that neighborhood school, what school is next that would be a good fit for all of those reasons.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Henrik?
Yeah, so Ms. Coopey's point about school size, maybe next month, and as an ongoing thing, where you have the school, we could just put the number, the total capacity. I know it's not an exact number, but the total acceptable capacity at each school, just so we can kind of get that as a proportional number to what the...
See what I can find.
If it's attainable, and I don't know if it's ever going to be an exact number, because, you know, you can finagle a few rooms and classes, but... and then my other question is, Vicky Soto, we have 172 students, I think, there. What's the capacity? Are we close to capacity there? Or is that, it's all pre-K, so is that filled up, or we?
No, we do have additional classrooms available. In fact, we had a meeting this morning where the Miss Board just did bring to our attention that we are probably going to have to open another class based on our student needs and I think it's pre-K to, I'm sorry, I'm going to say that wrong, birth to free program. So we are looking at how to fund that at the moment. And we will probably have to open another classroom in January when we return.
Okay.
So we're constantly looking at.
So there is a growing need for that here.
Absolutely. And that was part of the mindset when we made the decision to have the preschool program there, because we know that it's a program that will be expanded in the next couple of years.
Thank you.
Mrs. Corcoran?
But to clarify, the need is surpassed by our ability to fund teachers to staff those classrooms, at least at the pre-K level. I know it's difficult to find the staff and in our budget to find the money for the staff to assist with that need. I think we could probably, in a perfect world, we could have that building filled right now, but you know, we're limited.
And we really are struggling district-wide, but particularly in that area, and especially in staffing.
With the pre-K, is that, and did I misunderstand, is that a sliding scale tuition, or is that just free enrollment?
This is the integrated program, correct? Heather can do a much better job answering that than I can.
So the integrated program, like for our students with exceptionalities, it is free, because that's how the law works. For our typical students that are their peers, they pay $5 a day for their half-day session, 5 days a week. That's called come and play with me money, and the money is put back into the program to make sure that they have the resources they need to have preschool.
Okay. And do you know the number of students with exceptionalities in the SOTO program? And can you share that?
Yes, right now, we have over 80 students with exceptionality.
Over how many?
Over 80,
So about half the population?
more than half. It should be half because it should be a 50-50 program, but we have more difficult time filling the typical peers because of the half-day event. Parents have a hard time only sending their child for 2.5 hours. We run a morning session and an afternoon session. So when parents can, they find preschool does full day. We have yet to be able to, as Andrew put, have the funds to turn our program into a full day program yet. But right now, so they're half day. So we have more students with exceptionalities than we do our typical kids, but we try really hard to keep it 50-50.
And then, so I'm sure you guys have looked though, because you have a $5 fee. Looking at if you went to full-time, adjusting that fee to make that
Yes, we're possibly adjusting the model. So we're just sliding scale from readiness classrooms. Still obligated to service our students with exceptionalities.
Sure.
So really, it's kind of a whole picture thing when you look at the model overall. And we will continue to work on that and try to expand, but for the immediate need, we need at least one more half-day classroom in order to meet those students' needs. And that doesn't pull the students off the waiting list. We have lots of students on the waiting list that are typical students, but they need the full day.
And any of the students with exceptionalities, I'm assuming we are mandated to provide services?
Yeah.
So, and there's no limit to that. I mean, if we got, and not to say it's gonna happen, but if we had another 100 students, we'd have to make the space for them. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Borges, since you're on, I have a question as to how many are actually on this wait list that need full day. I know that you know your wait list.
So, the majority of the wait list wants full day. A lot of them will take a half day, if they can couple that with another daycare that we can transport them to.
Sure. That's the missing link, is getting them transported to another
Well,
program.
now the missing link is our in-town daycares are full. So we don't transport outside.
Right.
And now a lot of parents are having to go to the next town over to find a preschool and daycare, because our in-town daycare is full.
Very interesting point. Good conversations for next budget season.
Can't
Thank
think that
you.
far ahead.
Okay, are there any other questions for Ms. Mangini about enrollment registration? I know it became Mrs. Borges, I apologize. Nothing else? Nothing further? All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Thank you so much. Meeting is adjourned at 7:10.